The moving truck pulled away from the curb with a sputter, leaving behind a neat 2-story colonial-style home nestled at the edge of a pristine cul-de-sac. The sun dipped low over Evergreen Lane, casting gold across freshly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, and white picket fences. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. Sheriff Daniel Reyes stepped back onto the porch, his eyes scanning the neighborhood with the careful attention of a man who'd spent 2 decades learning how to read people, even from across the street. But today wasn't about work. Today was about starting over. Behind him, the sound of wheels on hardwood echoed softly. "Dad," came Lily's voice, soft but steady. She rolled her wheelchair forward, eyes wide as she took in their new surroundings. 14 years old and wiser than most adults, she wore her scars like armor. Her long recovery after the car accident had taken a toll, but Lily had never let it dull her curiosity or her courage. "This is it, kiddo," Daniel said, trying to force cheer into his voice. "New house, new chapter." Lily smiled, but her expression was guarded. She'd been bullied before, ignored, pitied, whispered about. A neighborhood like this, with its rules and cookie-cutter expectations, didn't always know what to do with someone like her. Just then, the front gate creaked. A woman, probably mid-50s, slim and severe, with precisely cut blonde hair and an ironed blouse, strode purposefully toward them, clipboard in hand. Her eyes, a piercing shade of grey, scanned Lily's wheelchair before flicking to the aluminum access ramp being installed on the porch. "Hello," the woman said, voice sharp enough to cut through drywall. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA president." Daniel stepped forward, instantly alert. He wasn't wearing his uniform, but his presence always carried authority. "Afternoon, I'm Daniel Reyes. This is my daughter Lily." Karen gave a tight-lipped smile, not to Lily, but to Daniel. "Yes, well, I hope you reviewed the community guidelines before moving in. This ramp," she gestured with her pen, "isn't in line with the aesthetic standards we uphold here. You'll need to submit an architectural review form before installing structural modifications." Daniel stared at her, blinking slowly. "It's not structural. It's federally required accessibility accommodation under the ADA." Karen didn't flinch. "That doesn't exempt you from HOA protocols. We've had complaints about similar modifications in the past. They lower property values. I trust you'll cooperate." Behind him, Lily shrank slightly in her chair. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "We'll submit the paperwork, but the ramp's staying." Karen gave him a thin smile and scribbled something on her clipboard. "Of course. Just keeping things orderly." She turned on her heel and walked away without another word. Lily whispered, "That was weird." "That," Daniel said, watching Karen disappear behind a trimmed hedge, "was someone who thinks she runs the world." A shiver worked its way down his spine. Not because Karen was rude. He'd dealt with plenty of bureaucrats. It was her eyes. That dispassionate, calculating way she looked at Lily. Like she wasn't a child. Like she was a nuisance. A problem. To be solved. Later that evening, after dinner, Daniel sat at his desk, reviewing a file from work. Outside, porch lights flickered on one by one. Evergreen Lane glowed like a postcard. Yet something gnawed at him. He glanced at Lily, asleep in the next room, her wheelchair parked beside the bed, her therapy dog curled at her feet. Then he heard it, a soft rustle, the creak of the gate again. He peered through the curtains. Karen was standing across the street, staring. No clipboard this time, just silence and stillness, and that same unreadable look in her eyes. 3 days passed before the first letter arrived. Not an email, not a knock at the door. A crisp typed envelope, tucked neatly into the mailbox. No stamp, no return address. The paper inside was thick, printed in bold blocky font, and smelled faintly of perfume. Notice of violation. Immediate correction required. Subject: non-compliant wheelchair access ramp installation. Ramp exceeds approved dimensions by 7.5 inches. Property owner is in violation of architectural conformity guidelines. Section 3.2a. Immediate removal is required. Failure to comply will result in fines and possible legal action. Daniel read it twice, then once more, slower. He sighed, placed the letter on the kitchen counter, and looked out the front window. Across the street, Karen stood watering her perfectly symmetrical rose bushes. The hose wasn't on. She just stared, watering air, watching his house, like it had committed a crime. You think she measured the ramp? Daniel asked aloud. Lily, perched at the kitchen island, rolled her eyes. She definitely measured the ramp. She'd have to trespass to do that. Don't you need evidence to charge someone with trespassing? Lily asked with a grin. Daniel gave a wry smile. You watch too many cop shows. Lily's therapy dog Moose, a golden retriever with too much energy for his own good, bounded into the room. Lily's eyes lit up as she dropped a piece of bacon from her breakfast plate. Moose snatched it mid-air. Daniel stood and retrieved his phone. He opened the security app, linked to the doorbell camera. Rewinding, he scanned through the previous night's footage. Nothing. Then he checked the motion camera above the garage. Just a shadow around 3:14 a.m. Creeping up the steps and, ducking out of view, he paused. Enlarged the frame. The figure was lean, short, wore gloves. A clipboard, Karen. He exhaled slowly and saved the video clip. Later that day, a knock came at the door. Not Karen this time, but a woman from the HOA board. Janice something. Nervous, eyes. She fidgeted with her scarf as she handed Daniel a community newsletter. It's, just the monthly update, she said. They're discussing some changes at the next board meeting. New security proposals. She's been very insistent. Daniel looked at the woman closely. Everything all right? Janice's smile faltered. She just really values order. That's all. Keeps the neighborhood nice. As she turned to leave, Daniel caught a glimpse of Karen, standing behind her garden hedge. Still, watering air. That night, Moose barked furiously at the back door. Daniel grabbed his sidearm, and flashlight, heart pounding, not fear, but a cop's instinct to expect the worst. He opened the door slowly, and swept the beam across the yard. Nothing, except his stomach twisted, deep scratches on the back fence, fresh, jagged. The next morning, the second letter arrived. Second notice, non-compliance escalation ramp structure. In continued violation, animal reported unlicensed. Barking complaints received. Additional HOA infractions. May result in municipal involvement. Daniel crumpled the letter in his hand. Lily rolled in, sleepy-eyed, holding Moose's collar in one hand. Dad, she said softly. Did you take his collar off? No, Lily opened her hand. Inside the collar, a nail, lodged inside the leather lining. Intentionally, precisely placed, pointing inward. Daniel froze. Lily whispered, She's trying to hurt him. Daniel slowly placed the collar on the counter. Every cop instinct, he had screamed that this was no longer about rules or ramps. This was war, and Karen had just made it personal. Daniel Reyes didn't sleep much after the nail in the collar. He sat in the kitchen, long after Lily went to bed, sipping lukewarm coffee and reviewing neighborhood ordinances. Not because he needed to, but because staying still made him feel helpless, and helpless was a feeling he didn't wear well. Outside, the wind stirred softly through the hedges. The perfect calm of Evergreen Lane held fast, but Daniel's mind was anything but. He kept replaying the footage of the shadow creeping across their porch, frame by frame, Karen's clipboard, her slinking posture, a predator camouflaged in khakis and pearls. At dawn, he walked the perimeter of the house. The ramp had muddy boot prints. The flower bed beneath the bay window was disturbed. Someone had crouched there recently. That's when he saw it, a glint of black plastic, tucked between two thick stalks of ivy. A camera, no bigger than a thumb, nestled among the vines, angled precisely at their front door. Daniel's jaw locked as he snatched it free. It was wireless, no identifying marks, just a small data port and a blinking red light. It was still recording. He took it inside, connected it to his laptop. The device required no password. Sloppy. Within seconds, he was watching clips from the past 3 days. Karen's voice echoed in his kitchen as she muttered behind the camera. During installations, inspections, even a video of Lily arriving home from school. But the final video made Daniel's blood run cold. Karen was sitting in her car, late at night, parked just down the street, speaking softly to someone off-screen. "She's not right, that girl," Karen said. "Always staring, always lurking with that dog. The father's not much better. Got that silent type of rage. They don't belong here. I'll make sure they leave. One way or another." A long pause. Then the second voice responded. "Male. Calm. Almost bored. You know what to do. Keep the pressure on." Daniel froze the frame, enhanced the voice, tried to pull metadata from the file. No luck. Karen wasn't acting alone. Later that day, Lily returned home from school, quieter than usual. Her face was pale. She didn't mention it right away, but Daniel could see it in her eyes. Something had happened. He waited until dinner, then asked, gently, "Lils, anything happened today I should know about?" She stared down at her plate, then said, "Someone spray-painted my locker." Daniel tensed. What did it say? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Rotten. Wood needs to go." His knuckles whitened around his fork. She added, "I think it's because of the wheelchair. Some kids said the HOA lady came to school last week. Talk to the principal." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Karen went to your school. She said she was there for a community outreach thing. But after that, stuff started happening. He didn't show it, but a chill ran down his spine. Karen wasn't just targeting their property. She was targeting his daughter's life. That night, Daniel installed his own security system. Military-grade, heat-sensitive motion sensors, smart cameras, encrypted uploads. No more blind spots. But around 3 a.m., one of the alarms pinged. The front porch camera activated. He opened the feed on his phone and saw a silhouette, slender, standing completely still in the middle of their lawn. Karen. No clipboard. No camera. Just her, watching the house like a statue. He didn't open the door. He just watched her. She never moved. Then, slowly, she raised one hand and pointed directly at Lily's bedroom window. By sunrise, Karen was gone. Daniel had watched her from the shadows of the living room, one hand hovering over the pistol on his hip. She hadn't knocked, hadn't spoken. She simply pointed at Lily's window for nearly 10 minutes, then turned and walked back across the street, vanishing behind her trimmed hedge, like a ghost sinking into a grave. The next day, the house was quiet, too quiet. Even Moose seemed wary, ears pinned back, trailing Lily like a furry bodyguard. Daniel didn't tell her what happened in the night. Not yet. No need to add more fear. That's when the knock came. 2 men stood on the porch in hard hats and reflective vests. One was young, awkward. The other, tall, stone-faced, with city credentials clipped to his chest, wore the expression of a man who'd seen too many things he didn't care to understand. "You Daniel Reyes?" the older one asked. "I am. We're here on behalf of County Code Enforcement. Got a report of unpermitted construction." Daniel folded his arms. "You're talking about the ramp." "Nope. Says here. Non-compliant foundation alteration, unauthorized electrical work, and..." He squinted at the clipboard. "Inconsistent landscaping against residential safety standards." "Landscaping," Daniel repeated slowly. "That's what it says. Need to do a full inspection." Daniel's tone darkened. "Got a signed order." The man handed it over. Daniel scanned the form. The document looked official. County logo, inspector ID numbers, docket codes. But his eyes narrowed on the signature at the bottom. Inspector P. Langston. A name that didn't exist in the department. Daniel knew, because he personally signed off on city inspection rosters every quarter, and the seal in the corner. Wrong. The eagle had only 4 feathers on the left wing. It was a fake. "This is a forgery," Daniel said coolly. "And if you try to step inside this house, I'll arrest both of you for impersonating government officials." The younger man's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "Who sent you?" Daniel demanded, stepping forward. The older man hesitated, then cracked. "Some woman called Karen. Said she was with the HOA and that you were a threat to the neighborhood." Daniel's jaw locked. "Leave, now." They left. But not before the older man muttered, "She said you'd be difficult." That afternoon, Daniel checked his mailbox. Another letter, not a violation notice. This time it was a petition. "We, the undersigned residents of Evergreen Lane, request the immediate investigation and possible removal of Daniel Reyes and family due to ongoing disruption of community order and disregard for regulations." It was signed by 17 neighbors, half the street. Some names he recognized. People who'd waved, smiled, even offered pie. Karen's name wasn't on it. She didn't need it to be. Lily found it before dinner. Daniel tried to take it from her, but she read it all. Her face didn't crumble. No, she just got quiet. The kind of quiet that settled in, deep and heavy, like water pressing down on a sinking ship. "Dad," she said softly, "am I the reason they hate us?" Daniel knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. You're the reason we're still standing." She nodded once, but her eyes said she didn't believe it. That night, Daniel sat in his garage, staring at the fake city order, the forged signatures, the mounting pile of evidence. Karen wasn't just harassing them. She was weaponizing the system against them, turning it into a noose. He walked into the kitchen, placed the documents on the table, and began recording everything. Every letter, every video, every image of damage. Because this was no longer a neighborly dispute. This was tactical, calculated, predatory. And Karen had made one critical mistake. She thought he was just another homeowner. She didn't know. He was the law. The coffee pot gurgled in the background, but Daniel Reyes didn't hear it. His kitchen table looked like a crime scene. Forged inspection documents, photos of vandalism, the sabotage dog collar, freeze frames of Karen pointing at lilies, windowed like a curse. But it was the petition that stung most. It wasn't just paper. It was betrayal. By people who'd smiled to his face and handed their loyalty to a tyrant in a power suit. He tucked the evidence into a manila folder marked K. Whitmore. escalation file, slid it into his briefcase, and grabbed his badge. If Evergreen Lane wanted to start a war, they just rattled the wrong cage. He arrived at the county building at 9 a.m. sharp. His office, a windowless back corner of the sheriff's department, wasn't much, but it held authority. Daniel wore it like a second skin now. His uniform, his nameplate, his decades of quiet justice. He called a meeting with the local DA and 2 investigators. "I'm not here to complain about an HOA neighbor," he said, placing the evidence on the table. "I'm here reporting a conspiracy to commit harassment, falsification of government documents, unlawful surveillance, and potential endangerment of a minor." They raised eyebrows until he played the video. Karen's voice. The shadow at the door, the whispered one way or another, then the clip of the collar. The nail. The room shifted from curious to deadly serious. "I want her investigated," Daniel said. "Every call she's made, every city employee she's ever contacted, every false report. I want her record peeled back like old paint." The DA nodded grimly. "You'll get it." She stepped over the line, but Daniel knew something else. Karen didn't just cross a line, she erased it. Meanwhile, back on Evergreen Lane, Lily stayed home from school. She didn't ask to. She just said she felt sick. Daniel didn't argue. She spent the morning in the sunroom, with Moose curled at her feet, sketching in her notebook. Her drawings were detailed. Houses, flowers, clouds. But today's sketch was different. It was a woman. Cold grey eyes, tight mouth, clipboard clenched like a weapon. Karen. But behind her were strange shapes. Dark tendrils curling behind the shrubbery, like something unseen pulling her forward. Lily didn't know what it meant. She just felt it. That afternoon, Daniel returned, with renewed purpose. He didn't knock on Karen's door. He waited. She emerged like clockwork at 4 p.m., carrying a plastic watering can and feigned innocence. "Karen!" He called across the street. She turned slowly, that ever-calm mask already forming. "Yes, Mr. Reyes? I have reason to believe you forged county inspection paperwork, installed surveillance on my property, and submitted false claims to municipal authorities. I'm opening a formal investigation." Karen blinked. Not flustered. Just blank. Then, "Sheriff Reyes, surely you don't think—" "I don't think," he said. "I know. And you're not untouchable." Something flickered in her eyes then. Not fear. Calculating. "I suggest you speak to your attorney," he said, turning back toward his home. "And don't set foot on my property again. You're being watched now too." But as he reached his porch, Lily opened the door, face pale. "Dad." "Something's wrong." He rushed inside. The security system's alert was flashing red. Backyard motion detected. 2:13 p.m. Daniel pulled up the footage. The camera showed a figure in a maintenance uniform, slipping into the yard, glancing over their shoulder. They knelt at the wheelchair ramp. A glint of metal. They were loosening the bolts. Not vandalism. Sabotage. Daniel bolted for the door, already dialing dispatch. Karen hadn't backed down. She'd escalated. And this time, it wasn't just harassment, it was attempted harm on a child, his child. The backyard was dead silent when Daniel stepped out, sidearm holstered, but visible. His eyes swept the grass, landing on the ramp. The bolts were halfway unscrewed. Whoever had been there knew what they were doing. Just enough to make it unstable, not obvious. One shift of Lily's wheelchair, and it could have collapsed under her. Daniel's stomach turned. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was attempted murder. He crouched, careful not to disturb the evidence. He snapped photos of the bolts, the dirt impressions left by heavy boots near the edge of the deck. One boot had a unique triangle pattern on the sole. He followed the footprints to the side gate. That's when he saw it. A small business card, pinned to the fence with a thumbtack. Premium home repairs. Licensed. Bonded. Discreet, a name. Cal R. Maddox, a number. And on the back, in faint pencil, paid. No contact. HOA referral. Daniel stared at it, rage burning cold through his chest. She'd hired someone, used the HOA as a middleman, and the man didn't even realize who he was working for. He pocketed the card and went inside. Lily sat on the couch, Moose's head in her lap. Her eyes followed him, calm but scared. "Am I going to die?" she asked suddenly. Daniel froze. Because of her, his voice cracked. Not a chance. At the sheriff's office that evening, Daniel dropped the card on Investigator Dalton's desk. "I want a full workup on Maddox. Sell records, bank transfers. I want to know where he was at 2:13 p.m. today." Dalton studied the card. "You think Karen paid him to sabotage your house?" "I know she did." Dalton nodded. "We'll pull his background. If there's a thread, we'll tug it till it unravels." But it didn't take long. Maddox had a rap sheet, 2 counts of trespassing, a restraining order from a previous client, and a revoked license he'd apparently been faking. 3 days earlier, a direct deposit hit his account, $3,000, from an LLC tied to Evergreen Compliance Group, a shadow entity connected to Evergreen Lane's HOA board. And guess who sat on that board under a pseudonym? Karen Whitmore. Daniel returned, home after midnight. His house, his fortress, now felt like a battlefield. Every window, a potential threat. Every noise, a warning. He double-checked the locks, reinforced the ramp bolts, then sat at the kitchen table and watched Lily sleep on the hallway monitor. She stirred once, briefly, then settled. Moose curled tightly against her side, like a lion guarding a princess. Daniel clenched his fists. Karen wasn't just a problem to be solved. She was a rot in the system, using her power, her connections, her manipulation to cloak her malice in paper and procedure. But now, she'd left fingerprints, literal and digital. At 6:30 a.m., he stood in uniform at Karen's door. She opened, it with a robe and teacup in hand. Fake surprise smeared across her face, like too much lipstick. "Sheriff Reyes. To what do I owe?" "You're under investigation," he said coldly. "I suggest you don't leave town, and keep your lawyer on speed dial." She sipped her tea slowly. "You really think this will end well for you?" she asked. Daniel stepped closer. "For you, Karen. I know it won't." And then she smiled. But it wasn't a smile of fear. It was triumph. "You don't know what I'm protecting," she said. "This neighborhood runs on more than property values. It runs on control, and I've always had it." Daniel stared. "You're not just hiding something," he said. "You're part of something." Karen raised her cup in mock salute. "Now you're learning." Daniel barely slept. Karen's final words echoed in his head. "You don't know what I'm protecting. This neighborhood runs on more than property values." It wasn't just posturing. That smile. That certainty. It meant she wasn't bluffing. The next morning, Investigator Dalton called with an update. "You were right. That LLC, Evergreen Compliance Group, was created by a shell company out of West Virginia. Guess who the listed board advisor is?" Daniel didn't need to guess. Karen. Dalton added, "There's more. Turns out 3 other HOA chapters in the region are under the same compliance network. We've found at least 7 complaints of intimidation, forged citations, and even 1 arson case. All buried in legal red tape. Same pattern, different towns." Daniel exhaled. "How long's this been going on?" Dalton paused. Years. Maybe a decade. This isn't a rogue HOA. It's a front. Daniel hung up and stood in his kitchen, heart pounding. Karen wasn't just drunk on neighborhood power. She was part of a deeper, older game. HOA leadership wasn't her role. It was her cover. Later that day, Lily received a letter in the mailbox. No return address, no postage. Just her name in shaky block letters. Inside was a photo. Grainy, low light, taken from outside her window. She was sleeping in her bed. Daniel's blood ran cold. He immediately called Dalton. This just became personal surveillance of a minor. Federal territory. Dalton agreed. We'll fast-track the subpoena. But Daniel wasn't waiting. He visited Lily's school personally, checked security footage. Nothing. Then cross-referenced all known service workers assigned to Evergreen Lane in the past 2 weeks. One name popped up twice. Denton Knox, private security contractor, former Marine, hired last week for a property audit by the HOA. Karen had muscle now, and muscle had Lily's photo. That night, Daniel took no chances. He moved Lily to his sister's house 2 towns over. Didn't explain why. Just told her it was a daddy-daughter vacation. Lily didn't argue, but before they left, she handed him a page from her sketchbook. It was Karen again, but this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 4 shadowy figures in suits. Eyes hidden, hands outstretched like puppeteers. Beneath them were houses, dozens, all connected by strings. At the center, a single burning house. Theirs. Daniel kept the drawing, because it felt real. He returned that night alone. His house was empty, still, too still, until he stepped into the living room and saw the front door slightly ajar. He pulled his weapon, advanced, slowly. No sign of forced entry, but the smell was wrong, acrid, like plastic left on a hot stove. He found it in the kitchen, a small device, buried beneath the sink, blinking red, a homemade incendiary. He didn't panic. He followed protocol, disarmed the rig, logged it, photographed everything, then checked the cameras. But the footage was gone. Hard drive, wiped, cloud backups, scrambled. Someone had been inside his system. He found a flash drive on the kitchen counter, plugged it in. A single video, Karen, sitting in a bright room, speaking directly to the camera. Sheriff Reyes, I admire your persistence, but this isn't your world anymore. You think you're upholding justice, but justice died when we started signing mortgage papers. What runs this country now isn't law, it's compliance. She leaned forward. If you don't stop, there won't be another. Warning, you're out of your jurisdiction. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen, because he now understood. Karen wasn't afraid of the law. She wasn't accountable to it. Not anymore. And if he wanted to stop her, he'd have to go beyond the badge. Daniel Reyes sat in the darkened room, the flickering light from the screen, casting grim shadows across his face. Karen Whitmore's chilling message played again in his mind. You're out of your jurisdiction. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA chairwoman anymore. She was part of a system bigger than Evergreen Lane. A system that thrived in the shadows, unaccountable and ruthless. But Daniel was no stranger to shadows. He was the sheriff, and he wasn't about to let his family be collateral damage. The next morning, Daniel assembled a trusted team. Investigator Dalton, a cybersecurity expert from the state police, and a federal liaison from the Department of Justice, who specialized in corruption cases. The battle had escalated from local harassment to organized crime. The federal liaison handed Daniel a subpoena that morning. This network, Evergreen Compliance Group, it's a front for laundering money, suppressing dissent, and manipulating property markets. We have enough to bring down half the HOA boards in the state. Karen's just the tip of the iceberg. Daniel nodded. Let's dig in. Days turned into nights as they pored over financial records, intercepted communications, and hacked into encrypted data vaults. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Karen wasn't alone. She was the face of a sprawling syndicate that controlled housing developments across several counties, extorting homeowners, threatening families, and using intimidation to maintain ironclad control. One by one, they identified accomplices, fake inspectors, private security thugs like Denton Knox, even corrupt officials within the county government. Then came the breakthrough. A secret meeting was scheduled for the following weekend, an annual HOA summit in a luxury hotel, where the board leaders of Evergreen Compliance Group would gather. Daniel's team planned a sting operation. They would catch Karen and her cronies red-handed. The night of the summit, Daniel entered the ballroom undercover as a private security consultant. Karen's icy eyes met his across the room. A silent battle of wills ensued. When the meeting commenced, Karen spoke with venom, detailing their strategy for handling the Reyes family. Daniel's heart pounded. This was his moment. With a nod from the federal agents nearby, the room flooded with law enforcement. Karen Whitmore, Daniel announced, voice echoing through the stunned crowd. You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, harassment, and attempted murder. Karen didn't resist. But before she was escorted out, she whispered in Daniel's ear, "This isn't over. You've made powerful enemies. They never forgive." Daniel held her gaze, steady. Maybe. But for every shadow, there's a light waiting to shine. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. The petitioners withdrew their complaints. The forged documents were exposed. Repairs were made to the ramp, and security cameras monitored the property without interruption. Lily smiled again, her laughter returning like a fragile dawn. Daniel realized the fight wasn't just about a house or an HOA. It was about protecting what mattered most, family, and sometimes that meant stepping beyond the badge to confront the darkness, no matter where it hides. The story of Evergreen Lane spread quietly in local news, a cautionary tale about power, corruption, and resilience. And in the quiet moments, Daniel often glanced at Lily's drawings, now filled with sunshine and strong walls, not shadows, because they had survived together.